Hi everyone, Scott Lewis here for Wirefly. I'm here in the dark today to start the review of the Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE for Sprint. I'm starting this review off in the dark to show you the 5-row QWERTY keyboard that is backlit on the Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the lights on now and we'll start the review. So this is what the Photon Q looks like with our lights on. The Photon Q is running the Android 4.0 operating system, and something very interesting about the Photon Q, it comes with the one home screen or single home screen. You slide one over and it gives you the option to add an additional blank home screen or to start off with a template. You can have up to 7 home screens on the Photon Q. Something I found interesting in our information packet from Motorola is that they'll be releasing an unlockable bootloader shortly after launch for the Photon Q. Having an unlockable bootloader allows you to load customized ROMs, create partitions to make recovery and backup easier, and manually adjust the performance of your phone's hardware. This is not something I would recommend to everyone, but for some of our more techie viewers, you might be interested in knowing that. Most people know that Google purchased Motorola not that long ago. Some of the Google products are coming pre-installed on Motorola phones now, and I thought the Chrome browser was something that was very interesting. I do like the Chrome browser on the Photon Q. It's very nice and very fluid. So one of the main reasons why somebody might purchase the Photon Q is the slide-out 5-row computer-like QWERTY keyboard. It is backlit, it has a nice slide, it's very easy to use, and it has great feedback while you're typing on it. Now, since it does have a keyboard, it's a little bit thicker than your average smartphone. It's 13.7 millimeters thick, and it has an integrated battery. The integrated battery on the Photon Q is 1,785 milliamp hours. So a pretty good sized battery. But once again, it's integrated, so you cannot replace it, you can't take it out, you can't pull the battery to reset the phone. So that's a negative when you're talking about ease of replacement if something happens to go wrong with the battery. Another benefit of having the battery integrated on the Photon Q is that the Photon Q is splash resistant. The Photon Q can handle a little bit of rain, a little bit of damp. If you spill something on it, it should be okay, but no guarantees if you jump into the pool with it in your pocket. The Photon Q also has NFC technology built into the back of the phone, so you can use things like Google Wallet and other NFC technologies to send and receive files and transfer photos. I really believe NFC technology is going to take off on applications and phones, so if you're looking for a new phone or if you're buying a new phone, I would recommend getting something with NFC technology built in. Something about the Photon Q I was very impressed with is that Sprint has finally, and Motorola together, have come out with a phone that has multiple bands. So the Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE is considered a world phone. That means it has GSM capabilities. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up the screen a list of technologies that the Photon Q uses, as well as a list of the bands that it sends and receives in. So it's very important to somebody that might be traveling abroad or using the Photon Q in multiple countries. Let's go ahead and go over some specs real quick on the Photon Q. The Photon Q is a 4.3-inch diagonal LCD display with screen resolution of 540 by 960, which would give it a pixel density of 256 pixels per inch. The Photon Q does have a dual-core processor inside. It is a 1.5 GHz dual-core processor. It's accompanied by 1 GB of processor RAM, as well as 8 GB of internal storage. It does have a spot here on the side for a micro SD card. It's right underneath this cover. And you can add up to a 32 GB micro SD card, and it closes to help the splash-proof or water-resistant part of the Photon Q. So the Photon Q could have a total of 40 GB of storage. The front-facing camera is a 1.3 megapixel front-facing camera. The rear camera is an 8 megapixel camera with an LED flash. It records video in 1080p at 30 frames per second. In the unboxing video, I asked for questions that people would like me to answer here in the full review, and one of them was about signal strength, and we can see that there's 3 bars of signal strength on the Photon Q right now. 3 bars of signal down in our Wirefly studio here is actually really good. So I will say the Photon Q has pretty good signal strength. In my call quality tests, I will also say that the Photon Q had very crisp and very clear sound. I also received a question asking about the speaker on the Photon Q. While it was very good at low to medium high volume, at the highest volume setting, you started to lose a little bit of the clarity. The last question I was asked to cover on the Photon Q from our unboxing video on our Wirefly YouTube channel was to test out the camera. So let's go ahead and take a look at the video I shot. This is the 1080p recording Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE for Sprint. We'll say the display looks very nice on the Photon Q. The yellows are very yellow, the greens are very green, the purple on the flowers and the trees are very purple. I am standing in the shade. I'm going to take one step over and get into the sunlight here to see what the display looks like. Now I am also holding the phone about 8 to 10 inches away from my mouth, so we'll see how the audio comes out on the Motorola Photon Q.
Now, even in the sunlight, it's actually very easy to see. Colors are still very true. So I would say taking photos in the sun would be the same on the display. Let's take a look at some still images.
So that was our 1080p recording from the Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE. A couple quick comments before we move on to the photos. The display color looked better on the actual phone than it does in the video file. I was a little surprised at that. And also the audio quality was very good throughout that. Even though the phone was only 8 to 10 inches, that's generally where you're going to be holding a phone, and it seemed to pick up all the background noises very accurately as well. So I'm going to say taking video with this phone is very good. Now let's take a look at the still photos. First up is a panoramic picture that I took. The color in this photo is very realistic, very true to color, and it was very easy to get it into the panoramic picture mode. Next up is a photo that I took in our Wirefly building. This is a piece of artwork that hangs up here, and I wanted to take a look and see if the 8 megapixel camera would capture the detail in this photo. The camera did a nice job of picking up all the color contrasts and keeping everything nice and clean. Next up is another piece of artwork that hangs here in our Wirefly building. I chose this one because it shows great depth. The camera did a very nice job of picking up that depth, as well as keeping all the detail in the foreground. Overall, I'm very satisfied with the camera here on the Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE. Now to wrap up our full review, I'm going to go ahead and run an Antutu benchmark and then a Quadrant Standard benchmark and give you the results of those. Before we run any benchmark though, let's go ahead and use our advanced task killer and make sure everything's closed so we get the best possible score that's available. So we're going to start off with our Antutu benchmark. We're going to go ahead and run a full test. Something to keep in mind, the Antutu benchmark and the Quadrant Standard benchmark are going to test the processor, the video processor, as well as the read-write speed to the memory of the phone. It doesn't have anything to do with network connectivity, so the fact that we have the Photon Q connected to both the 4G LTE network as well as the Wi-Fi network, it has no bearing on our score. I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off now, and I'll pick it up at the very end of the test, and we'll go over our score of the Antutu benchmark. Alright, our Antutu benchmark is wrapped up and we have our total score. Our total score is 6,506. You can see that total score is made up of our CPU, GPU, RAM, and our read-write speed of the Motorola Photon Q. So our score for the Antutu benchmark is 6,506. It's a very solid score. Let's go ahead and run the Quadrant Standard benchmark. We'll run our task killer again one time to make sure everything's closed. We get an optimal score for the Quadrant Standard benchmark. And once again, it's testing the graphics processor, the main CPU, the memory, and the read-write speed on the Photon Q. I'll go ahead and let the Quadrant Standard benchmark run, and we'll pick it back up as we get the score and we'll go over it. Looks like our Quadrant Standard benchmark's about wrapped up. That's our last screen. Let's go ahead and get our results. So our Quadrant Standard benchmark score is 4,584. We can see it's just below the HTC One X. It's above the Transformer Prime, the Atrix, and the Samsung Galaxy Tab, as well as the Galaxy Nexus. So a very strong performance from the 1.5 gigahertz processor, 1 gigabyte of RAM on the Photon Q. That's going to wrap up our full review of the Photon Q. If you have any specific questions that I didn't cover in this full review, please make sure to leave them here on our Wirefly YouTube channel. I've included a link in the description to see the price of the Motorola Photon Q, as well as a link to our Wirefly data widget to see how much data you might use with your Photon Q. If you're interested in getting the Photon Q, I've also included a link to our Wirefly upgrade checker to see if you'd be eligible to upgrade to get the Photon Q 4G LTE from Sprint. And that wraps up our full review. My name's Scott Lewis for Wirefly. Thanks for watching.